Welcome everyone. In this video, we are going to introduce you the basics of hazard identification, or in short, sometimes known as HAZID. This video will cover the aspects of what is HAZID, why do we do HAZID, when to do a HAZID, as well as how to conduct one. So, what is HAZID? It is a systematic review and brainstorming session usually carried out in a workshop-based discussion using a list of standard international guide words. These guide words help us to determine the possible hazards present. Subsequently, it also prompts us to think of what are the likely causes or threats that could lead to a hazard consequences. It also helps us to identify control measures which can be either preventive safeguards that are in place to prevent a hazard or mitigation safeguards that are in place to mitigate the credible consequences. Following that, formal risk ranking will be undertaken to assist in identifying high-risk areas and focus for risk reduction. On the other hand, HAZID can also help us to identify any major accident hazards in the workplace. So, what is the purpose of HAZID? Here are some of the objectives of performing a HAZID. Firstly, it helps us to identify opportunities for inherent safety as well as safeguards required to be in place. Not only that, we could also determine the possible threats, consequences, and escalation factors for each of the hazardous events. This HAZID study will eventually result in any recommendations or risk reduction measures proposed to eliminate or mitigate the identified issues to as low as reasonably practicable, or known as alarm. When exactly is the best time to perform HAZID, or when can they be performed? Typically, a HAZID study is carried out throughout the life cycle of any installation, but particularly important during the early design stages. Here are some of the examples when HAZID can be carried out, such as design, construction, or installation phase. How do we go about doing a HAZID? In a nutshell, the steps of conducting a HAZID are summarized in this flowchart. The very first step is to gather a team required for the workshop and agree on the same objectives. The team is usually led by a facilitator who should be independent from the project but have good working knowledge of the process review. Following that, questions we look to answer at this stage could include: which plant area or nodes are we looking at? What is the purpose of the workshop? With this, we are now ready to gather and start our HAZID, working through all the HAZID guide words systematically, brainstorm on risk, causes, assess safeguards, which is preventive or mitigative, propose any recommendations, and lastly, perform a formal risk ranking, and the cycle repeats. So, this concludes my sharing for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you find this information useful and see you in the next one.